You are listening to the U.S. of N.A. by Nation Beer, a series of stories about the people and places from every corner of the country who are helping fuel the N.A. beer movement. If you like this episode, please add us to your library in Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you prefer to listen. For more great N.A. stories, including our many beer reviews, visit nationbeer.com. Interested in getting free samples while helping the non-alcoholic movement grow even further? Then consider joining IRL Nation, our new sampler platform pairing great food and beverage brands with great people ready to share them in real life. Join and share through groups and clubs you belong to, or just as a solo sampler. Signing up is quick, easy, and free. Go to nation.beer for more information and to join today. Hello, and welcome to the U.S. of N.A. I'm your host and chief optimist, John Eggleton, principal of Nation Beer. I'm really excited about today's episode as I'm joined by Laura Silverman of Zero Proof Nation. If you've been following the NA space for a while, there's a good chance you already know who she is, as she's been a leader in the category for quite some time. And she had a lot of interesting things to say. We first talk about her advocacy in the space and how much has changed in the time that she's been involved. She made a decision to go alcohol-free in 2007, well before the modern movement even existed. We then talk about the growth that's happening right now and how that's both exciting and maybe a little bit concerning with so many new brands competing in the same space, as well as the hemp-derived market that has really come on strong these past couple of years. We end by talking about some of her favorites. She name drops a lot of brands, so I put those that got more than a passing mention in the show notes. I also asked Laura her opinion on some of the language the media uses to describe this category, as I figure she is as much an authority on whether terms like mocktails should stick around as anyone. Hope you enjoy the episode, and here's our conversation. All right. Our guest today is no stranger to the world of non-alcoholic beverages. Laura Silverman is the founder of Zero Proof Nation, an authentic community she has built around the zero proof lifestyle. She herself went alcohol-free about 17 years ago and has seen the hospitality industry change dramatically since that time, now catering to those who might be completely sober for a night, for a pregnancy, for a month like Dry January, or maybe as their ride or die permanently. So Laura, thanks so much for joining us today and welcome to the U.S. of N.A.
Thank you so much, John. What a great introduction. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, first things first. So I know we were both drinking NA beers here, and on my side, and I figured I'd give a shout out to these guys. I know they listen to the podcast, and I also love myself a good local or regional beer. I guess I would put this in the regional category. So this is Bright Bear, which is it's a pretty new one. It's out of Boone, North Carolina, and this is their Appalachian Pale. I'm in Atlanta, so about 5 hours away. Boone is a great town. It's a mountain town. There's lots of good skiing. So I'm going to crack one of these open.
Is that where Boone's farm comes from?
I hope not. I really would not want to have that association with, I like Boone, North Carolina too much, but it could be. I had never thought about that, so we'll have to Google that.
I already cracked it open so you don't get that satisfying sound that you just did on air, but I'm drinking one of my absolute favorites. It's the last Jab Go Brewing, the Jab Grapefruit IPA that I have in the house. We'll have to get more. But
awesome.
Hello to Joe and Heather and Jared from their team as well. So thank you for that. It's like Spindrift Grapefruit and an IPA had a baby. And that was the very first, I was like so compelled to write a review. That was the first review that I wrote like on a brand's website. Because I mean, if I reviewed everything, I don't think I would have time to do anything else. But it's just so good. I had to put it down on paper. And at the time, it was just a limited release. So I was like begging them to bring it into their permanent rotation. And they listened to me and many others.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, I remember getting one of those, I think, in our sampler pack when they, I think they call it the Pilot Series, and they were in like that white and black can.
Yeah, that's right.
So I guess to jump into it, so I think some of our listeners know you as the OG, or at least one of the OG voices in the non-alcoholic sober drinking space. So for those who might not know you as well, why don't you introduce yourself and give us, a little bit about your perspective on the non-alcoholic category?
Sure. First of all, I love your shirt. That is awesome. Is it just like a one and done, or do you have them available for people?
It's a one and done for right now, but you never know. And for those who are listening on the audio version, it's a Nation beer. And the bottom of it says running team, which you can't
I can't
actually
see it.
see
It
that on
looks
screen.
cool. So, yes, I think you should
It's very retro.
your merch, John. So, for those who might not know who I am, hello. My name is Laura Silverman, and as John mentioned, I'm the founder of Zero Proof Nation, which is, and of course, like Nation on Nation, we love it. Lots of nations on the show. It is a global pretty comprehensive non-alcoholic resource hub. So it started out in 2019, believe it or not, in late 2019 as an Instagram feed where I featured brand founders and a couple of adjacent people in the industry and the space when it was still quite the nascent industry. And I would argue we're still in somewhat of a nascency, but it's starting to catch on to some mainstream now. But we were very much in the just post seed lip, pre everything else phase. So there wasn't much of an industry, but there was something there. And I wanted to highlight brand founders who started a non-alcoholic beverage when maybe others might have told them, why are you doing that? You can make more money with alcohol. And this was also pre-pandemic. So I thought it was interesting and compelling enough that I wanted to tell some stories. I wanted to be part of this growing movement, but also because I had this personal tie to not drinking alcohol. And John, you mentioned that it's been 17 years, and it has been. I got sober when I was 24, and it was for physical and mental health reasons, mostly mental health, but that was affecting my physical health, and it's all very much connected. I did not have an off switch. I did not know how to moderate. The term sober curious wasn't even in the lexicon at the time, but I certainly don't think that I was sober curious. I just wanted to be able to drink alcohol, quote, normally. And what is that? That's another podcast. And I couldn't. I just couldn't. And I ended up getting hospitalized for alcohol poisoning a couple of times. And so I knew that I needed help. I needed to seek professional help, and I did. And I'm so grateful that I did. But at the time, I really thought it was a life sentence to be sober. I didn't think in terms of forever, but it sure felt like forever. And how could I have any fun if there wasn't any alcohol? And of course, the landscape then, and even quite recently, was that there were no non-alcoholic beverages to partake in. And not even partake. I mean, there's nothing really except for Diet Coke and club soda and, milk. And it wasn't an episode of the Brady Bunch, I wanted to have something different, but there wasn't anything different to have. And so I've been an advocate for options, for inclusivity, for a lifestyle that could accommodate beverages like this since the very beginning of my time being sober. And I know that there have been other people who've come before me who, laid the groundwork for me to then lay the groundwork for others that have come since. So all of that to say is that I had a really profoundly deep self-interest in wanting beverages, wanting social spaces, wanting all of the things that have become a part of this wider dry economy, as it's been called, because of my personal interest in this. But I also knew that I couldn't be the only one who sought beverage alternatives and who sought third places and who sought retail that could accommodate to their kind of I'm like completely hold on. Completely just had a brain fart there. Hey, I'm neurospicy. I've got ADHD, and I completely got lost in my own thoughts. And I didn't.
Spicy. I love that.
I didn't even finish my description of what Zero Proof Nation was until I dove into why I started it. But essentially, it started as an Instagram feed, and then as the pandemic was this driver in a whole lot of different things, including people drinking less, people wanting options. The state of retail had completely changed because there wasn't. In that first year, you couldn't go to stores really, so the stores came to you, and there was this, huge launch of all of these brands who were doing direct to consumer when maybe that would have not been their first retail channel. So there were all of these brands that were coming to the fore. And later in the back half of the year, there started to be these little things called non-alcoholic bottle shops, with the Open Road in Pittsburgh, Spirited Away in New York. Those were the very first two, and Better Roads was the first completely online one. In the States, I think Wise Bartender in the UK had been a thing, or had certainly started around that same time. And then there was Sands Bar, which has been just a pioneer in this industry, in this category in Austin, and Listen Bar as a pop-up in New York City, and Redemption Bar, which was in London at the time, was a completely alcohol-free bar. It's since become a place where you can have everything there. But there were only these three concepts in the whole world in the beginning of 2020. And so there wasn't much to, quote, put on a map, but I started to put together directories so that people could find them. I didn't want my website to be someone's last stop on their journey of discovering, but I wanted it to be a first stop where they could explore. So I had directories of non-alcoholic bottle shops. I had directories of booze-free bars. I started domestic, and then I expanded internationally. I had a directory of beverages, which will never be fully comprehensive because there's something new every day, which is a great problem to have. And we can dive into that a little bit more soon as well. But it's just been growing in front of my eyes in real time. And I was in the position where I was able to devote a lot of time to it in those first couple of years. And I would maybe argue this whole time. But I was able to just kind of build it as it was being built. And that kind of leads us to where we are now.
Well, we always seem to find time for things that we love
Yes.
and enjoy. So we're all thankful that you did that with Zero Proof Nation, which, by the way, before I forget, I think a lot of people know you or know Zero Proof Nation for the map.
Okay.
Which, if you have not checked out the map at zeroproofnation.com, it's a global map. It's got all of the non-alcoholic bottle shops that Laura was talking about, pop-up bars, dry bars, all the good things. I know we've used it extensively when we're traveling just to see where, where
cool.
there's.
Well, please write me a testimonial.
Yeah, we would love to do that.
That's awesome. I like
Definitely.
knowing that actual real life people have used it.
So a lot has changed in the category, like you were saying, but is there anything that's been the same that has not changed since the beginning of this journey for you?
Interesting question. I think my passion certainly has remained constant, although I'll be honest, some of the passion is starting to dwindle a little bit as I feel like I have to make everything that I do be somewhat revenue generating because I got laid off from my job, which is just the reality of the economy that we're in. And I started this because I had a passion for it. It was a passion project. And I want to get back to that place of putting the energy that I have into it for good and not just for survival. So I'll get back there. But I know that my passion is certainly one of the constants. I would also argue that, interestingly, Sands Bar, I've mentioned Chris Marshall of Sands Bar before, but he's still at it, and he was at it before, and it's nice to have a constant throughout all of this. And so Chris has been one of them. It's great to see Ben Branson, the father of Seedlip, and some might argue the grandfather of this movement. He's still doing things. He's doing new things. He and his team just launched Season, which is an alcohol-free bitters line, and they just also launched a distillery for non-alcoholic dark spirits in the UK. So he's continuing to innovate. I think another person that I've been quite happy to see still doing her thing is Ruby Warrington, the mother of the term Sober Curious, and then Tani Lara, I can never pronounce her last name correctly, but Tani Lara, she and I met in the blogosphere close to 10 years ago when we each had different sobriety blogs, and she's since written Dry Humping, a book about dry and sober dating, and launched a beverage brand, and she'll be on my my little video podcast tomorrow. So it's nice to see that there's some people out there that are still doing their things. And brand wise, there's been some consistency with Athletic has just grown and grown and grown. I remember when they were a niche regional Northeastern brewery. And I actually remember when I couldn't find Athletic anywhere. Which is a really weird thing to think about because it's so pervasive. I mean, it's in every Whole Foods, it's in all of the bottle shops and most liquor stores too, grocery, everything. And then, stadiums, it's starting to be a part of live entertainment, which is fantastic and so needed. But I remember when it wasn't available anywhere except for if you happen to go to the brewery in New or Stratford or wherever they were in Connecticut.
Yep.
So it's been really kind of a wild ride to see how there are some players that are still doing their things, and then there's so many new points on the map, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned Athletic. I mean, and you're right. I mean, they've gone from the small little brewery till now they're one of the largest craft breweries in the United States. They are seemingly everywhere, although I feel like even just talking to people who aren't in the non-alc category, a lot of them still don't know about them, or they maybe have in passing or they've seen it, but they really don't know the brand. So there just tells you how much more opportunity or ramp up, there still is to come. You talked about it still being a nascent industry. And I think when I see things like that, it reminds me that that's totally the case.
Yeah, not everyone's bubble.
You mentioned Seedlip and Athletic, and as two of those big brands that have really broken out. There are, it does feel like in the last couple of years that this whole category has just been sort of supercharged, and there's lots and lots of brands, and a lot of them are smaller businesses that are trying to get traction and trying to get distribution, and there's a lot of them who are competing in the same space. As someone who's such a big champion of the category as you are, is that something that you worry about a little bit?
As in, do I worry about the fact that there are small brands out there, or do I worry that they won't get enough footing because there are large brands that have a bigger piece of the pie, or both?
Well, a little bit of both, but I guess more of the second thing, more that there's so many brands that are competing not just with the bigger guys, but with each other as well.
Yeah. So it's a both and, I think, when it comes to an answer, and it's also complicated. Let's just compare for a second to alcohol. There's always going to be tons and tons and tons of brands out there competing with each other, competing for shelf space, competing for retail space, competing for being part of any kind of bar's well or top shelf or whatever. And there's always going to be way more. Well, always is a hard word to put 100% faith in, but there's likely for a while going to be more alcohol brands than non-alcoholic brands, even though we've seen quite an infusion in this dry economy. So there's always going to be competition when it comes to anything in the economy. And I think that's just the way that it works. Not just competition with each other, but different types of categories. And I think you could argue the same if you were thinking in terms of hospitality. There's always going to be chain restaurants. There's always going to be fast food, mom and pop restaurants with family history, maybe Michelin star that don't have that family history, don't have the chain, but are these unique spots. And as a larger part of if you take a 30,000 foot view of how that works, they work well because there's a need for it all. And so I think there's going to be a need for the big brands, a need for the little brands, a need for regional, local, hyper-local, global. I mean, right now there's just so many places that have Heineken Zero, which is great, but we didn't even have that not that long ago. So
yeah,
I think before we can get to the place where any kind of bar or restaurant has a multitude of different brands on the menu, we've got to first get to the point where most of them have an option on the menu. And so we're still in the beginning. I think it's easier for Heineken and for Athletic to get that national distribution, international distribution. And so I think for the mainstream, for wider society, it's a good thing that there are some big brands out there that have these footholds in their categories, because it means that people are being introduced to options. And as a champion of indie, and as a champion of small business and women-owned and BIPOC-owned and queer-owned, and I love buying local. I love supporting local businesses. As a champion of indie and small, I of course worry that some of these guys may not be able to last very long, or just won't have the budget to continue. And of course, I've seen, in terms of the landscape of bottle shops and bars, I've had to remove many an establishment from the map over the past few years, because for one reason or another, people have not been able to continue, whether it was like just too much rent, or they found that maybe a brick and mortar bottle shop wasn't the way to go, and pop-up events were more profitable and more community engaging. Right. And so people are finding what works for them, whether it's with brands, whether it's with the model of what they're doing. And so I think I do worry a little bit, because I love small, I love craft, I love indie, and I want them to succeed. And I also am grateful for the larger picture here, that there are more brands and larger brands out there that are finding their way into a lot of places, so that people can at least have one option when they go to a concert, rather than no options. I hope that the small guys can continue as long as they can, and I will always support small and local when I'm able to. Yeah. But it's a complicated question and a complicated answer. I hope that I tackled it.
No, I think that's very well said. I mean, you started with talking about the alcohol industry, where there are lots of brands, and there are still new brands that are coming on board. And NA may be a small piece of the overall adult beverage market, but it's definitely growing. And yeah, I think you're right. I think having a good combination of those national brands, those more local brands, and both of those are going to hopefully contribute to, getting more restaurants and, the hospitality industry to, like you said, have a option.
Yeah.
The ones that don't have one yet, and hopefully more options for the ones that do. I know we've talked about on a couple of other episodes here. I mean, we love seeing athletic on a restaurant menu and hope to see more of that, but we'd also love to see others on there too. And, beyond the beer category. So, I think all of the above is definitely,
and I think if I could, before we move on to the next point, I think one of the reasons why it's challenging for a lot of people who are not in the non-alc industry, who want to incorporate more options on their menu. And as a matter of fact, I had a meeting with some really forward-thinking people in the DC area who wanted to add more non-alc options to their menu. But the hurdle for them is that they are tied to certain distributors. And I think this is where the Wild Wild West is right now, in terms of national distribution, regional distribution, local distribution. There are certain brands that have their footholds, as I said before, in the distribution channels and know how to navigate that well. And that is not my forte. I wish I knew more about it, but I know enough about it to know that it's a complicated thing. Because non-alcoholic doesn't fall under the same legal category as alcohol, obviously, but they're sort of being looped into this 3-tier distribution model. And so this venue that I was speaking with, they were very interested in trying some of these brands that I brought for this private tasting into some of their establishments and into a little sort of niche bottle shop within their larger liquor store. But they're like, well, who distributes them? And I said, well, how much time do you have? Because every single brand has something different right now. And a lot of it is, I'm grateful that there are wholesale channels like Air Goods and like Fair. But a lot of these bars and restaurants don't necessarily want to order off of a wholesale channel. They just want to make an order with their distributor. So I think that, yes, we would both, and the larger we would like a lot more options on the menu, but until we can figure out how these other brands can get regional and then national distribution, we're sort of, I wouldn't say stuck, but we have what we have for now.
Very true. It's it does seem like non-alc is, and I think if you go even beyond the non-alcoholic category, there's just so many different options and there's so many brands, and distribution seems to be set on its ear anymore in terms of just how people are able to get different products.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll see some good things. So speaking of changes in the category, I think non-alcoholic is a little bit of a bigger tent than it was even a few years ago. And, forget about if you've been to a non-alcoholic bottle shop or a specialty beverage store. If you've been to a gas station, you've probably seen the, explosion of THC and CBD beverages. And I'm kind of talking to the greater population when I say you probably have seen. And, for those who may not be familiar, so the 2018 Farm Bill made hemp-derived beverages essentially federally legal, as long as they fall under a certain proportion. And, they're only allowed to use, it has to be hemp derived. So it's not the same as cannabis that's recreationally legal in, I think, 24 states now. So that has certainly had a huge impact on the industry. I mean, what do you think about those drinks and their growth and just how quickly they've all popped up?
Yes. Yes is not an answer to that question, but it is, it's certainly, I think there are so many different points here that are interesting to touch on. One, from a public health standpoint, it is harm reduction when we're talking. Now, okay, let me back up and edit myself when I say harm reduction, because I consider THC, CBD, hemp-derived beverages that are low dose to be harm reduction from alcohol. If we're talking about a can of something that has 50 milligrams of THC, I don't think we can say that is really harm reduction from alcohol, because that is a lot of THC, and even 2 to 5 milligrams can affect someone. So all this is to say that I am not an expert in any of this, and I've only recently become a little bit of Cali sober curious. So I've tried a few different low dose THC beverages. They didn't really do a whole lot for me. I don't necessarily want to get intoxicated or high because I have this history with substance use disorder, and I want to have my mental faculties and all of that. I think as a larger category and what it can do for public health, and if I'm talking about this from like a low dose perspective, so alcohol just on its own, I am not a prohibitionist. I just want to be clear here. I know that there are people who can drink alcohol responsibly and not very much of it and rarely and whatever, but alcohol in and of itself is a toxin, and it's not good for your physical health. It's not good for your mental health. And I think it has larger in the moment repercussions when it comes to impairing someone's driving abilities, impairing people's judgment, but certainly dangers of drunk driving. I don't think that there are as strong of a danger with driving having had a 2 to 5 milligram THC beverage. Again, it affects everyone differently, but I think in terms of an alcohol alternative that does have some kind of intoxication, a low level of intoxication, it is a better alternative. It is a better option. And I think that as a society, we're going to, and we have been slowly moving away from just enormous amounts of alcohol. I mean, we're starting to see it. We're experiencing it right now. I mean, I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know how long it might take before alcohol goes the way of the cigarette, but I think we're starting to see, and certainly there are statistics that will back me up here. NIQ has a lot of things, a wide variety of statistics websites, Statista, whatever. They're showing that people are drinking less or people are wanting different options. On the whole, THC beverages as an alcohol alternative, if people want to feel something, but don't want as much of a physical and mental, or as large of a set of physical and mental consequences, I think that can be an option that people can explore. And yes, there is the 2018 Farm Bill. There are some regulations there, but it's still so unregulated right now, or it is regulated, but it's just a complicated area to wade through. And so there's still a lot of education that needs to be done, a lot of legislation as well, but certainly education on, and sure there are websites, and there are, shout out to Callie Sober Mom, who is doing really amazing things for everyone in general, but especially for mothers, to sort of help lead them away from mommy wine culture and introduce them, if they're looking for an option, to these lower dose THC and CBD beverages. But I think we're going to continue to see more of these types of beverages. I don't think it's necessarily a problem per se.
I think you touched on education, which is definitely a huge piece of all of that. There's so much to unpack in that category. It's not just about small doses of THC or CBD, which you're right. I mean, for most people, it's going to be fairly harmless in small amounts, but everybody is going to take that a little bit differently, and so that's one piece to it. But just education around all the different things that might go into a beverage and what they do. And we are in a weird period where. And we actually have a few guests coming up from the legal cannabis side, within states where it's fully legal from a recreational standpoint. And so that's the regulated side of the industry. And there's sort of two sides to it right now, where there's the unregulated part, which is much bigger, or at least involves more states, and then the regulated side. So it's a weird transition time. We'll see how all of that falls out, but I definitely agree that education is most important, making sure people understand what they're drinking, what's in that beverage that they're consuming, and can make the best decision for themselves.
It's not just THC or CBD or hemp-derived products that we're talking about either. There are certain adaptogens and nootropics, which for some people can seem completely innocuous and not be a problem. And then for others, it can interact adversely with medications. Certain adaptogens and nootropics can potentially have adverse interactions with each other. And so everyone is going to react differently. And if someone, I don't even know if people still have, if you have a physician, if you have your own doctor, I don't have someone that I've gone to for years, but it is worth talking to a medical professional if you're ever unsure of what something is and you don't fully trust what the internet tells you, or at least if you're on medication and need to know how things could have potential interactions. It's just anytime there's any kind of additive. And again, I have done a lot of research, and I still don't know everything. So, and that's coming from someone who's a, quote, armchair expert in this, or maybe actual expert. I have no idea. But yeah, it merits education, re-education, and just questioning what's out there.
All right. So let's come back to talk about favorites a little bit. So I know Zero Proof Nation. Yeah.
Total 180. I appreciate it.
So let's talk about favorites. I know Zero Proof Nation is agnostic. You love all brands. You want to support the category, but maybe Laura Silverman has certain brands that she may prefer or drink more often, or just happens to have in her fridge right now. We'll let you decide how to answer that question. Well, but I know you're drinking something from Go right now.
Go. As a matter of fact, I think one of my or some of my favorites are coming out in a piece on Dry Atlas today, so people can check that out.
Oh, cool.
But there's some brands out there that I absolutely love and will buy time and time again. And one of them is the Pathfinder. Another is Tennyson. And another is All the Bitter. I would say those are some of my ride or dies. I add All the Bitter to actually everything. I've added it to, it works really, really well with a lager. So I think the lagers are just kind of like this baseline beer that you can play with if you wanted to add some nuance to it. And so I think those are a really good palette to add orange bitters or even New Orleans bitters too. But I also add All the Bitter aromatic to coffee. I add it to oatmeal, yogurt, ice cream.
Wow.
And then the New Orleans bitters also work really well with some NA red wines. And of course, they work really well in cocktails or just bitters and soda. So those are, the thing that I love about All the Bitter especially is that they are digestive bitters and cocktail bitters, and they're completely alcohol free. They are an absolute favorite of mine. Let me see, what else am I loving that I might not have put in that favorites piece on Dry Atlas, which includes Namari, Bark and Bitter, Novara's Aperitivo, Geronimo's Sparkling Select. Everyone is going crazy about their red wine, and it's really, really good. But I actually really like their Sparkling Select, which is their like sparkling brut. And Geronimo is an Austrian. For those not in the know, it's an Austrian wine, non-alcoholic wine brand that actually comes from all of the wines are de-alcoholized from their family wineries, award-winning alcoholic wines. So there aren't a lot of like family wineries that are doing the whole de-alcoholization process because it's expensive and timely. But it's not just taking a lab-created liquid or sort of a white-labeled alcoholic wine and de-alcoholizing it. They've got these alcoholic wines that are, or traditional wines rather, that are award-winning, and then they want to bring that same level of quality to non-alcoholic wines. So they're doing some pretty cool things. In terms of beer, I mean, I love Athletic. I love Go Brewing. I miss Partake Stout. The thing I love about Partake is that they're so low in calories. I have no idea how Ted and his team do that. Like, I literally don't know what the science is, and I kind of wish I knew. But you could just crush like 2 or 3 of them easily and, not feel guilty at all. I mean, you could crush like a 6-pack of that, but I would feel kind of sick after that. But they do have like an Oktoberfest, hoping they bring back a stout. But I do like that Partake can do the lower calories. When it comes to something that's like completely zero sugar without any kind of added anythings, I love hop waters. So I love Hazard's hop water, their passion fruit flavor. I love hop tea, which is out of Hoplark. And they do hopped waters and hopped teas. Oh, there's more. I mean, I know with beer, I love Mash Gang, especially the weird stuff. I haven't seen a lot of the weird stuff in a while. I think because since they've moved, their U.S. production is doing a lot of their tried and trues, like pale ales and IPAs and things. But
right.
I loved when they were getting completely bizarre and wacky. Uncool is actually one of my favorite beers, period. Like, I would put them up there with Athletic, with Go. They are out of Charlottesville. Well, you know this, John, but for those that are listening that might not know, they're out of Charlottesville, and I have some pride about that because I went to university in Charlottesville. I went to UVA, and I would love to go. I'm going to Charlottesville later this month, and I hope to visit their brewery. I don't know how they do it. They're kind of becoming a bit of a mash gang where they're just releasing all of these weird, fun, delicious things.
Yeah, they've got the weird stuff
now. They're just coming after like banger after banger, and it's just this wild and crazy ride where we're trying all these like pickle beers and pastry,
the drunken noodles,
like everything. So it's really great. Yeah, I mean, and in terms of a widely available product that I still really like, I love what Lyre's did to the category and has done for the category. And so when I see a cocktail out there on a menu that has Lyre's in it, like, I will order it. I am quite proud that brand has really made its way onto many a non-alcoholic cocktail menu. So there are certainly so many out there. I love what Gather Beverage, their very small craft indie, is doing. And I love Sovi wine as well. And they just did a rebrand with my friend and NA Dossier co-host, Haley Jordan. And their new brand looks absolutely stunning. But what's even more exciting is that they also have a new product, which I can't wait to try. It's an orange wine. So that looks interesting. Yeah,
nice.
there's I mean, bajillions and bajillions out there, and I love so many of them. It's a problem.
Yeah,
Parch,
like
Parch, I love you, Parch. I love actually one of the doesn't seem like it's as popular as the other SKUs, but I love the spiced piñarita, and that's not getting enough love if you ask me. And Flyers recently did a rebrand, reformulation, and I think they have some CBD beverages, or maybe they're all just low dose THC now, but I've been trying some of them. And yeah, Ted Seeger's is a great like easy drinking NA beer that I like to put some orange bitters into. So I mean, once you open up the gates, I won't shut up.
Yeah.
So maybe I should stop myself there. But suffice it to say is that there's so much out there.
This is the part of the Academy Awards when the music is playing in the background.
Trying to get me off the stage. I won't leave. Gosh darn it, I won't leave.
Oh, that's great. No, I appreciate that. And I am curious. So I'm sure you have brands that have sent you samples of things, but when you do go out to buy things, are you generally buying them in a store? Is it e-commerce? I'm just curious what the combination is.
So one of the things that I do actually buy when I'm out in the wild is Lagunitas hop water, because I'm absolutely obsessed with the Hoppy Refresher, the original. And I would argue that the original in a bottle is different from their new sort of original in a can. Like, it tastes different out of the bottle. It's so good. And I will get that when I see it at like Whole Foods or Total Wine. What I try to do is when I go to visit a bottle shop, I try to, check some of the points off of my map and visit and do some content and also talk to the owners. And so I'll buy products there. When it comes to e-commerce, usually I buy, and I have no business buying more. A, because I don't have a job right now. And B, because I am swimming in beverages that I'm very, very grateful that get sent to me, but I also am, again, buying. But yeah, so I'll buy at bottle shops, and if I'm doing any sort of e-commerce, I'll get something directly from a brand that I really like. But there are some, there are certainly some fantastic online bottle shops like the Zero Proof, which many people on social media have tagged me when they meant to tag the Zero Proof, and maybe it's vice versa too. Actually, one of those brands is a great NA beer out of Maine, which I love. It's 1820 Brewing, and they confuse us all the time, but they've got some great stuff. Their stout is fantastic, and they've got like a raspberry sour, like an all that raz they call it.
Yeah,
I think it's great that there are a lot of products in grocery now. It does worry me for the non-alcoholic bottle shops because it's just impossible to compete with a grocery channel. It's not apples to apples, it's apples to oranges. But I think that you're going to see different audiences in different target audiences in a grocery store versus a non-alcoholic bottle shop. You're definitely going to see people who want the education aspect and who want the community aspect at a bottle shop. They're going to go for those beyond, and they're going to go for the try before you buy too. So they'll get the education, they'll get the community, they'll get to sample some things and then bring some stuff home. Whereas at a grocery store, you're going to get probably a lot of people who aren't familiar with it or know exactly what they want. And maybe it's not like Athletic, for instance, or Bud Zero or whatever, like the Heineken Zero. You don't necessarily need to go to a bottle shop to get that. You could get that at grocery.
right.
But you're going to find a lot of these craft brands at a bottle shop that you're not going to find in grocery. So I think there's the need for all channels. And when it comes to what Laura Silverman buys, she should be buying less. But I typically in person,
Shouldn't we all?
like at a larger store, we'll get like a larger brand because it's just easy and typically cheaper. And when I go to a bottle shop, I'm going to get some local or craft or things that I can't find anywhere else. And if I order from a brand that I really love, it's like usually just direct on their website.
Well, I think to the earlier question, we were talking about alcohol comparison, when we're talking about brands overall. I mean, people will go to a grocery store and buy wine or buy beer, but they'll also go to a specialty store. They'll go to a wine store. So there's still that combination of places, and each might have a different place or a different utility for somebody.
Yeah, like going to a
they're all
butcher.
kind of part of that ecosystem.
Yeah, if you go to a butcher, or you could get something at the meat counter really easily, or in the grab and go section, and you could go to both places, and people do go to both places. So I think that there's a need, certainly, and a want for multiple types of channels. Yeah,
for sure. So last question we have before we come back to or finish up with kind of what's next at Zero Proof Nation, or what's up at Zero Proof Nation these days. But let's just say, I know we've ourselves used probably a whole bunch of buzzwords. I know I have, and I think you have, to describe the category and different parts about it. And there's been a lot of discussion around some of those terms. And so let's just say that you have been named the jargon czar in the non-alcoholic category, and you get to decide which names or descriptors are going to become the standard and which ones are going to go away. So what are any thoughts you have on
Oh, no. I have thoughts. I don't know if I should share them. Yeah, so I've kind of come around a little bit on the word mocktail. I used to absolutely hate it. I mean, nails on a chalkboard, hate it. But I think there is this new mocktail, which is essentially, it's a cute little drink. It's non-alcoholic. It's not necessarily trying to be like a cocktail per se. So like there are a lot of canned mocktails. Again, I want to say RTDs, like the ready to drinks. But I don't hate the word as much because I also know that it's an entry point for a lot of people. What grinds my gears is when they use the word mocktail to talk about everything in the category. And
Right.
you can't say mocktail for NA beer or NA wine or anything. So it's like, oh, I don't know someone was saying something and they're like, do you write about mocktails or is your thing a mocktail brand or whatever? And I had to collect myself.
It's become a catch-all for sure.
It's a term that exists for a lot of beverages within the category, but not for everything. So I would say, yes, use that word, but don't overabuse it. Don't overuse it. My favorite term to describe everything might be boring, but it's non-alc. I abbreviate non-alcoholic to be non-alc. And I think what that also does is that capsulates, I think, the whole category in that you could have non-alc beer, wine, spirits, RTDs, whatever, cocktails that can contain up to that 0.5% alcohol by volume or ABV, but don't necessarily have to. And I think it's ironic that it's coming from a person who has the term zero proof in my branding. Zero Proof Nation was, again, you have to remember that I started this before, and I didn't make up the term zero proof. Like, I have no ownership over that whatsoever. But I did start my platform when there wasn't much of an industry to speak of, and not a ton of people were using that term. It was like here and there, thrown around. And it was, I wanted to name something that didn't have the word sober or recovery in it, because even though that is my journey, I knew then, and especially now, that is not the journey for most of the people that drink these beverages. I didn't want it to feel sad or sort of life sentencey. I wanted it to be something exciting and sort of touch on a little bit of the travel that I did growing up and continue to do, much less of, but still love. That's where the nation comes from. But it's also, as you know, and I'm curious to hear where yours came from, but it's the nation as a whole of everyone that's drinking these beverages. It could also be your individual country that's the Zero Proof Nation, or it could be, the wider sort of community and population that is into these beverages. But zero proof can be dangerous if it's applied to everything, because if there is someone that has a religious belief that prevents them from drinking alcohol, and there's a zero proof cocktail on a menu, but that actually has 0.5%, it can be dangerous for that person, not necessarily from a physical health standpoint, but certainly something that we don't want to have people to have to wrestle with. So language is important, right? Because menus are important. People need to know what they're consuming. So there's the education and certainly the regulatory side of things, but there's also terms that people want to use that make this a more attractive category and make this a more attractive lifestyle, and not just like the sober beverages. So all that is to say that I don't have an actual answer for all of it, but I like non-alc. I think it works for now, and I'll be curious to see where the language continues to travel as more and more people sort of adopt some of these beverages into their lifestyle. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what shakes out. And you're right. I like non-alc as well. It's short. It is inclusive. I mean, non-alcoholic is a category where inclusivity is important to begin with, and it's a name that's inclusive of everything. I mean, in addition to what you mentioned, it could also include the THC, CBD stuff, which does not contain alcohol either. It kind of works. So we'll see what people grab. We'll see what people grab onto.
Does this position pay well? this jargon czar.
We're still establishing that. Yeah, okay. We'll have to see. So what's up next for Zero Proof Nation? So I know that you have gotten more active with your Substack. And by the way, before I forget, we are paid members of the Substack, so I highly recommend anybody out there to check that out.
Thank you.
And you get some content some content for free, which is great. A little more connection and industry insider stuff on the paid side. So anyway, what are you guys looking to do, or what are you looking to
John,
do next
what are you
site?
guys? It's just, I love it when people are like, your team is amazing. And I'm like, oh my God, thank you. It's just me. So yeah, it appears that I'm doing something right. I think what's next for me is, I'm constantly refining and re-refining what is working and what isn't working. And I think, like I kind of alluded to in the beginning of our show, I've been feeling some pressure to just kind of make everything work so that everything can have the potential to generate revenue. And I think that's actually blocking me from generating anything because I'm just feeling this like pressure to do that. So I think I'll see more growth and more expansion, and ideas will flow more when I do have a full-time gig that can just take some of that pressure off. But I have a couple of ideas. I'm certainly thinking through some potential models, doing more on a personal side. I'm doing more product demos out in the world, meeting new people and getting them to taste products that I enjoy. So if they're interested brands that want to work with me, I can bring a little portfolio with me wherever I go. Zero Proof Nation as a map is continuing to grow. These places don't stop forming. I'm not complaining, but I think there are a lot of people that either think that this is what I do full time, and they wonder when their location is going to go up on the map. And I just, it's just a hard thing to have to manage with everything. So to all of you who are waiting to be on the map, I thank you for your patience, and I'm still going to put you on. I don't charge any location to be on the map. I want it to be, in order to be free for everyone, it's got to be free for everyone, including those that are on it. But I do certainly ask if anyone is inclined to either buy me a series of coffees or become a member of my Substack. Keep ZPN the NPR of NA is what I like to say. Because your meaningful contributions go towards supporting this very free and I think democratized platform. I just want to make all the content available to everyone, but that's kind of a problem for me. And then lastly, I'll say I've been taking a book proposal writing workshop with Tani Lara, and sometimes people need to take a class twice for them to really get it. It's not because you failed the first time, it's because you're doing the overview and then you're getting in the weeds. So I'm actually taking the book proposal class again, I think starting tomorrow, and I'm working on the book proposal, if I didn't make that obvious enough, and it's going to be related to Zero Proof Nation. So lots of things, still trying to figure it out. I'm still deeply passionate about this movement, about this industry, and about the people within, especially the people within the movement and the industry. And it goes back to my initial why, my driving factor, my driving force was so that people don't feel alone, so that people feel included, so that they don't have to go through what I went through in the beginning of my journey, and that we can all just be more authentically connected with each other and have something tasty to drink and not have a hangover the next day.
Well, this is a great place to end. And Laura, we really appreciate everything you've done in the category. I know I've said this to you before, but really appreciate all the passion and all the things that you've done for the category. The site is zeroproofnation.com if you've not been there yet. So check it out, subscribe. And Laura, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, John. And thanks, everyone.
All right. I want to again thank Laura for sitting down with us. And as a reminder, if you're a brand looking for a little help breaking into the hospitality space, you can contact her through zeroproofnation.com. We've got some really good episodes coming up for you guys after these past two conversations with both a beer lobbyist and an NA category advocate. We're going to take a little canna field trip in these next two episodes. First up is a man who was one of the first to put cannabis into an NA beer in 2018, Actually, he was a big part of several firsts, which we'll get into in the episode. Then after that, we have a talk with a cannabeverage brand selling primarily in California and Canada, both places where cannabis is recreationally legal, to get their perspective on where the industry is today and where it could be headed. So until then, thanks for listening and cheers.